Today's video is about creating hinged cards, part of hashtag ABC April 2026. So I'm going to turn these junk mail window envelopes and some strips of cotton cloth, and this is my prototype, and I'm turning those into a greeting card keepsake. And this is something that someone in our little art group was asking me if I knew how to make something like this where you could still see the inside and the cover both and without damaging them and creating some kind of a little journal. So I think I figured it out. So let's get started. For this gift card keepsake project, we don't need very much stuff at all because we need our cards. So we're not going to do anything to them. Those are the pages of our keepsake journal. I made a prototype, and that's how I was figuring out how this is going to work. So just as if this was just a card. So you can see the front, you can see the inside. The back is always where the hinge is going to be. So that's where the part comes that when I first started trying it, I realized you can't use like a washi tape and you can't glue the whole thing because you have to glue the opposite sides of each end of the hinge. So we have the cover of the card, the inside of the card, and the back of the card, and we want that same rotation on every card. So we want to see the front, the center, and the back, the front, the center, the back, and so on. So you notice we wind up with a lot of hinges here. Well, we need a couple of options for those hinges. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you, is that what I did with this one was I just used strips of paper. Now, if it's going to be open and closed, paper, if it's thin enough to act as a nice hinge, I don't know, paper can wear out. It can also tear pretty easily. So I wanted something sturdier, something that would be more in line with the idea of a keepsake. So I rejected the idea of using paper. So away that goes. I decided that cloth would be better. And I had this piece of very thin cotton cloth, and I cut it into, well, actually I tore it into 3/4 inch strips. And that's very sturdy, that's very strong. And then the reason I have some of these windows from junk mail window envelopes is because, sometimes, especially on maybe a small card like this, if somebody wants to write a note in it, they'll flip it over and they'll write a note on the back. And we don't want to cover up that writing either when we have a keepsake. So I was thinking about what do we have that's transparent that can act as a hinge for those occasions when somebody writes a note on the back. So that's where I was experimenting also with the idea of using the windows from junk mail because they're strong, but they're also foldable, and we can fold those. They're hard to see, but we can fold those, and they have more strength than paper. See, I'm really not able to tear it with ease. So I thought, hey, this would make a good hinge for those times when somebody writes on the back of a card. So we have options. Now, if none of the cards in your stack that you want to save have anything written on the back, the whole thing could be done with some thin muslin. This is thin, some kind of a thin cotton, real thin, like a interlining or something like that. Other countries, they call it calico for what we call muslin in the United States. So that's it. That's really it. And then we're going to glue it on. So there you are. That's it in a nutshell. But it's important to glue it on the back and always glue it on the back, interlacing between each other. So let's just go ahead and do a few. What I decided was a good length, and you might have different preferences, but I'm going to base all of this on the shortest card because I've got tall cards, short cards, and of course cards are all different sizes. So what I would like on the back of each of these cards, well, I've got about 1.5 inches. So I'm looking at 3 inches is what I want. And you can just go back and forth with your cloth and just pile up some little strips that are 3 inches long. And I will cut a few window envelopes. Now you could leave your hinge this wide, but I've been cutting mine down. Actually, no, I don't think you can because you've got to alternate. So I have a little stack here of cut window envelopes, so we'll do a couple with that. Here's what we need. We've got this. We've got some window envelope pieces. Oh, and acetate is too thick, and vellum tends to crack. So that's another reason why I liked these thin pieces of plastic. And of course, you could use like a kitchen storage bag and just cut little clear strips from like a polypropylene bag for like your kitchen storage. Those would be really good pieces of plastic too. Now they're a little thicker. The window envelopes are definitely very, very thin. So that could be something you look for, is a clear plastic bag, and cut that up into strips that are about 3/4 of an inch by 3 inches or 1 inch by 3 inches, that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and give this a try. And just start with the front one because it's the smallest. Now I have a couple of options for glue because of the cloth. Now there's 2 different glues that I'm kind of thinking about here. For the cloth, I'm thinking of this Beacon, either this 3-in-1 or the Fabric Tack. Now you could also use Fabric Fusion because that will adhere fabric to paper. You need to use this very sparingly because it's a very fluid liquid glue. It does not dry fast. So this would take you more time to assemble it. So that's why I don't prefer this. The other one that you could use maybe would be the tacky glue. Again, it's a very liquidy glue. You want to use it sparingly. But if that's what you have, great. I haven't used the Barely Art glue for fabric so far because it's more for paper crafting and jewels, but if it can hold heavier stuff like jewels and stuff, then and glitter or that sort of thing, it probably would work for fabric. But you know, this is fast drying, and a little dab will do you on this stuff. So I'm going to do a few with the fabric strips, and I'm going to do a few with the clear strips. I have these a little wide, I think, because I have them a little bit wider than 1 inch. But it's really, really important to realize you can only glue one side at a time. You can't put glue over the whole thing. So I really have to think in terms of only halfway on my little strips. So that'll be obvious here in just a moment. And you don't need a lot. And we're not too worried with this kind of fabric if it... So I'm just going to eyeball this and say, okay, I'm going to put that halfway in the middle. I'll go all the way to the, almost all the way to the edge here. And it doesn't matter if it isn't absolutely edge to edge with the fabric. This is very strong glue. So line them up pretty well. So now here's our second card, and I've decided for my assembly, so you have a choice here. You can either center it and have this centered on the larger cards, or they can be stacked with all the bottoms level. I think for mine, I'm going to stack them with all the bottoms of the cards level, and the reason for that is they're going to sit on a bookshelf better because all of the weight is toward the bottom and everything is level on the bottom. So I'm going to do that way, but by all means, if you want to have it centered, center it over the previous card, or align it with the bottom. So I'm going to align it with the bottom, and I have my scrap paper underneath, and so you can see I had to glue this side down, and now I have to put the glue on the top side of those hinges, and I'm just making sure it's nicely lined up. And now I can put the glue on again. My bottle's getting a little empty. I'm going to have to get out a fresh bottle here, but I've still got quite a bit in there, so I want to use it up. Now, Natasha of Treasure Books, of course, did a tab binding. I'm going to put that in the description box. It's a tab binding that she did, and that's basically where I got this idea. But with that tab binding, you would be putting the glue all on the same side. With this binding, you have to keep reversing it. But what you can see is happening is that all the tabs, just like in the prototype, all the tabs are always on the back of the card, always on the back. So this time I just have 2. So now I'm going to line up the back of the card, align it with the spine and with the bottom, since that's what I want to do. So on this card, all the cards alternate between what you're putting on from the previous card, so they'll just keep alternating. So I'm going to do this next one with the window envelope plastic. I'm just going to trim it down to about an inch. And instead of using the 3-in-1, I'm going to use the Barely Art glue because I know it works super well on plastic. Again, I want to make sure I only do half. So what I'm doing is I'm pretending like this next card has writing on the back, and I don't want to mess up the writing. Tends to want to slide a little bit, so I got to really encourage it to stay in place. So you can see that if there was writing on the back of this card, you'll be able to continue to read the writing. Yeah, so you got to be patient with the plastic. It takes longer for the glue to set with the plastic. And that makes sense. So I'm really pressing down on the card to hold it in place. Because it takes longer for it to set. Okay. And I can go back now to, you could do the whole thing with the, I'm really having to hold this down. It tends to want to creep. So that's important. You could even use pretty ribbon, of course. It doesn't have to be Doesn't have to be something plain like this. Use some kind of a pretty ribbon that matches. Suppose this was Christmas cards. Maybe you would like, we don't get very many, at least I don't. You might get a lot of Christmas cards. And so this would be a great way of turning Christmas cards from all your family members into a little book. You could teach your family members how to turn the Christmas cards they get into a little book. Wouldn't that be fun? I just chose to use this white cotton cloth because it's really what I have. I didn't have any wide ribbon that would be good. So, yeah, so I just decided I would use the clear strips and the white cloth. So you got to give it time to dry. So here it is. You can see it's got a, it's at the clear. You can't even see the spine, but it's very simple. And so you can see the front of the card and read the inside. And all of the hinging is done on the back. And one of my friends asked if I could have a way that she could save greeting cards from her family because they're like a little record of history. And at the time that she asked me, which was a couple months ago, the only thing I'd think of was modifying a photo album. So this just sort of came to me last week, is that how easy would this be? You can see all your cards, including the insides. And I based it on Natasha's tab binding. And then I'm going to put another link because Natasha has another video she just made where she wraps baker's twine around cards. So I'll find that one. I'll put that one in the description box. But I haven't seen anybody do it this way, where you just glue on one side at a time and just work your way through all your cards. And it's a little bit wobbly. It's not super tight. I think I could have glued it a little closer to the spine and it wouldn't be quite so wobbly. But on the other hand, even this way, these cards are now anchored together and it could go on a bookshelf. It's really neat. Anyway, I hope that this was a good idea for you and perhaps saving your cards. And I could go back and I could, so it's like there's some looseness in a couple of places. I could go ahead and put a little more glue toward the ends right there at the spine and it would hold these tighter together. So that's something to be thinking about. And that can be done afterward because we don't want the glue to go too far before we're ready to finish it off, because we don't want to mess up. We don't want to have too much glue on the wrong side of our strips. But I think this worked out really, really well, and I hope this was an idea that helps you to preserve your greeting cards as a keepsake. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for joining me. Bye for now.